Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In today's video, what I'm going to do is play back a recent talk that I gave in Raleigh, North Carolina at the All Things Open meetup. How's everybody doing? And in that talk, I discussed the state of AI in 2025 and especially how it pertains to Linux. There's all kinds of AI-related nuggets within the talk that I think you guys will find interesting, including how to make best use of it and how to have reasonable expectations. And not only that, I also discussed the future of AI as well, some of the things that I think we can look forward to, and also how I think AI is going to benefit Linux going forward. And I had a ton of fun during this particular event, not just talking about AI in Linux, but more importantly, seeing you guys in person, which is something that I don't get a chance to do all that often, but anytime I could see my audience in real life, well, that's a great thing. And the venue itself was also really cool. It was called The Barn, and it's located at Bandwidth in Raleigh, North Carolina. And as you can see from the footage, it looks amazing. And currently, I'm setting up a studio for myself. I just recently moved, so that's why you're seeing the green screen. But I think I'm going to take some inspiration from this venue when it comes to setting up my studio. And I can't wait to show you guys my studio as soon as it's done. But until then, well, I'm going to use this green screen. And I know the whole AI concept is something that's mixed within my audience. Some of you guys really like the topic, and others are completely put off by it. But as controversial as AI happens to be, I think there's some legitimate value as I'm going to discuss during this presentation. So what I'm going to do right now is play it back for you guys, so enjoy. How's everybody doing? Awesome. And how great is this venue? I mean, this is incredible. And my fiance and I just bought a house recently, like within the last 4 weeks. And I'm setting up a new studio and I'm looking around. I'm like, I could draw some inspiration from this. I'm really liking this. So perhaps maybe a little bit of this will bleed into the studio back home. But anyway, you're not here to hear about my studio. You're here to hear about Linux and AI. So let's talk about that. But there's a few things I just wanted to get out of the way that didn't really make it into the slides that I want you guys to keep in mind as we go through this. AI succeeds or fails depending on us, okay? How we develop it, whether or not we embrace it. As we go through the slides, you'll understand more and more what I'm talking about. But as a little spoiler, sometimes it seems like some companies are putting AI into things just to check the box, while other companies are handling AI in an intelligent way to offer value to consumers. So depending on how that goes kind of depends or determines the future, but just keep that in mind as we go on through the talk. But I'm going to talk about AI and Linux and, of course, some non-Linux things because AI is an all-encompassing thing that is pretty much everywhere. But being that my specialty is in Linux, of course, we're going to cover that as well. One of the things we're going to talk about is the overall AI landscape in 2025, which is interesting because AI, it seems like it's different every day, right? There's a new model that comes out in Claude or ChatGPT, or we find AI is in a browser that didn't have it before. So the overall landscape is changing frequently, but we're going to kind of talk about how things are right now. And later on in the talk, I'm going to give some predictions as far as where we think it's going to be going. Obviously, some of the ways in which AI is used today, I already gave away some things. I mean, it's in browsers. It's probably going to be in a kitchen sink before the end of the week. But also how Linux fits into the picture. There's going to be some interesting stats around that we're going to get into. But we're also going to talk about how to get the most out of AI while also having reasonable expectations. Obviously, AI is great, but is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not. We're going to talk about that too. But in my experience, I think anytime I have AI generate code, it's wrong 10% of the time. So, I mean, being that it's new, 90% isn't too bad. But first, who am I? Well, Todd gave away a lot of it already, which is great. I love all things open, and I really appreciate him having me out here. I appreciate you guys for showing up. Thank you so much. But for those of you that are new or just saw that an AI workshop or talk is being given and you're not really sure who I was, I have over 20 years of experience in Linux. I started using Linux before it was cool. When I first started, a Linux job was hard to find on a job board. You'd see probably 10 or 15 Windows system administrator jobs and maybe one Linux job if you're lucky. Oddly enough, it flipped the other way around. Not necessarily saying there's just one Windows admin job in general. There's a lot more than that. But it's interesting how Linux became this, or was this underdog that kind of just took over servers. And it's funny because people on Reddit and on the YouTube channel complain, like, when's Linux going to take over the desktop? Well, it's taken over servers. I mean, doesn't it get credit for that? But it's definitely a lot more. It's definitely a lot more popular now than it ever was. So, looking back at my decision to get into Linux and focus on that, I'm really glad I made that choice because it worked out well. I also have over 20 years experience in enterprise IT. I didn't necessarily start working in Linux. I started as a Windows sysadmin, and then I was using Linux since 2002. But I like many other people, you start in help desk, start in Windows admin, and then you're doing that, and then you gravitate and transition into Linux later on. And that's a story that's very common for Linux administrators today, and I'm no different. I'm the author of 6 Linux-related books, and yes, they were written in LibreOffice. So it's funny when I see people, in social media say things like, LibreOffice isn't as good as Microsoft Office, and I'm thinking, really? I wrote 6 books with it. It can't be that bad. But also, of course, I'm the host of Learn Linux TV, a YouTube channel I started in my bedroom of a house I rented in Waterford, Michigan in 2012. My very first video was done with a point-and-shoot camera pointed at my television that was just beside my bed. So, of course, I had an awkward angle with a microphone I bought for like $12, recorded on a laptop that I found used at a flea market. And at the time, I just kind of thought, oh, this is video game money. Maybe if I can make $60 or $70 a month, it'll pay for a PlayStation 3 game or something. I was just doing it as a hobby. I never knew that it was actually going to become my career, but here we are. And speaking of Learn Linux TV, just a few things about that. It recently surpassed 1 million subscribers, and I didn't even know if I was going to get above 200 or above 400,000. It's one of the largest. Thank you. It's one of the largest Linux learning resources. And what I like most about the channel, or what I try to do the most, is to take something that's extremely complicated and break it down into a way that people can generally understand it. I use a narrative in all of my videos, which isn't really all that noticeable. If you think of a narrative, you think of, Star Wars, the lightsabers and Darth Vader. That's a really exciting narrative. Narrative in education isn't nearly as exciting, but it is important because the story you're telling is where someone is today, checking out a technology or learning rsync for the very first time, and where they want to get to by the end of the video. And the story is how you get them to the end of the mission to help them understand it. And part of the reason why is because learning was always extremely hard for me. I have 90th percentile ADHD, so I just found instruction to be very difficult, especially for me. And it was really hard for me to get a grasp on a lot of things. But when I found that I understood something, I found that I like to explain it to people the way that I would understand it, the way that I prefer someone to teach me. And that's the biggest focus of the channel. And of course, distribution reviews. I got to keep everyone up to date on what's coming out. The Fedora 43 review just came out today. Over 56 million views. So apparently people care about Linux. I'm just blown away by this because I never knew that the channel would grow to the heights that it's grown to. And since I started in 2012, a lot of people look at it, wow, he's huge, but it was a lot of work over a long number of years and messing up constantly and doing YouTube wrong. And then later in my career, finding out you're always doing YouTube wrong because that's the only way you can do it, because the algorithm in YouTube, I like to tell people, is like quantum science. If you observe it, it changes quantum state and it's different. Anyway. So I've already mentioned, I guess I have that a second time here, that it's one of the largest Linux learning resources. But it's amazing to me that it's something that is enjoyed all over the globe. There's people all over the country, India, Brazil, UK, Italy. There's too many countries for me to name that are utilizing my content. And it's just so amazing to me that people around the world are finding value in the things that I do. And I really love this job. So I'm very thankful to be in the position that I'm in and the community basically lifting me up into that space because when you love what you do for a living, it's not work. I feel like I'm being paid for my hobby, and there's really nothing better than that. That's living life. You gotta love what you do. You just have to, because you're doing your job like a bunch of hours a day. May as well love it. Now, what exactly is AI? And it's one of those things that's kind of hard to define because AI tries to be everything to everyone. It's not, but it is helpful to most people. But the simplest definition I could think of, which is probably overly simplified, is artificial intelligence, or AI. It's designed to learn and then use that data to assist or produce a result. And I don't think it's going to take over the world or enslave us or anything like that. But I could have used a meme here that'd be pretty funny. But the reality is that it's a system for learning. That's what a large language model is. It's learning, what we're doing or what we're or harvesting the data, finding the connections, and then offering a result. And then nowadays, you can use it to generate entire lines of code or scripts and programs. It's just amazing. And it comes in many forms, as I alluded to a few times here. I mean, you have smart speakers like Alexa. It is AI, but anyway. Uh, chat agents and a multitude of in-app implementations. And going back to my point about AI being one of those things, it kind of seems like some companies are just putting it in everything just for the sake of being competitive. I can imagine in some companies you have a board meeting. Our competitor is doing AI. We need to do AI too, so let's do AI. And then that's why they do AI, just because their competitor's doing it. But in other cases, and I'm going to give an example later on of AI done right, like an example of a really good implementation of AI, and we're going to explore that. And it can help us with completing tasks. It helps us make sense of things, generating images, for example. I've used more than a few of them in thumbnails on the channel because I'm a Linux guy, not a graphic designer, although some people would claim that I am because I think I'm getting better at it. But and of course, this is way simplified. There's so many things that it can do, and those are the highlights right there. But although it's helpful, AI can sometimes work against us. Now we need to. It's reality. You see the news about jobs being eliminated. Amazon being a current example of that in the news right now. So AI is great, but there's some side effects, and also it's not always accurate. I've more than a few times had it generate some code, and I throw it into a test system, and it breaks things. Most of the time, it's right, but sometimes it's not. And this is interesting to me because in enterprise IT, if something isn't 10 years old, it's beta. Okay, that's the way that our mindset is. If something reaches that 10-year mark, then it's solid. But of course, AI has been around in various forms for a very long time. But what we call AI today isn't 10 years old. It's relatively new, but we're putting it in everything. But as long as we keep reasonable expectations, we understand it's not always accurate, but also it isn't exactly what we thought it would be like as kids. I mean, can you think of a picture, if especially for those of you that are a sci-fi fan, when you see like in Star Trek or any of these other shows, they're talking about AI, and then you're like, man, when I'm grown up later, wouldn't that be great? Yeah, I kind of thought it would be different too. That's kind of the first image that I came up with right there. But honestly, like, I had to throw a Jetsons reference in there with a robot that cleans the house, Rosie, obviously. I've named more than a few AI agents Rosie at this point. So, but AI is very different today than we probably thought it would be when we're seeing it in sci-fi. But, it is what it is. Now, how many of you have used AI? Yep, pretty much most. How many of you have used AI today? Pretty much the same hands, right? That's pretty cool. Well, let's talk about AI popularity a little bit. I dug up some facts that I thought were pretty interesting. A report by Menlo Ventures estimates that globally 1.7 to 1.8 billion people have used AI tools. That's incredible. That's a lot of people. And around 500 to 600 million people engage with these tools daily. And yes, I'm one of those people. I use AI for various things. On the YouTube channel, I use it pretty heavily. Not for what you think, though. It's when you're dealing with social media and you're dealing with marketing. I'm not a marketing person. I'm not going to be so great at coming up with hashtags, for example. So I'll have it generate hashtags and things like that. So probably not something you guys would have noticed, but I also use it in my automation system, not to write the code, but sometimes just to give me ideas, or sometimes it'll be just something weird that I'm trying to do and I'll have AI unpack it. We'll get into that. But according to AI Index report, Sanford, 78% of organizations reported using AI in 2024, up from 55% the year before. So there's no question that this is growing. It's growing quite quickly, as a matter of fact. And in the United States, usage of AI in the workplace has nearly doubled in 2 years. So there you go. It's again, it's popular. But another thing I want to talk about is that Linux is the key ingredient. No, that does not mean you have to run Linux to use AI. I mean, we all know that regardless of what your operating system happens to be, you can use AI on that operating system. And even if you can't, you can still use it in the browser. But how does Linux fit into the picture? Well, there's a bunch of different ways, so I had to summarize it a little bit here. But the majority of AI is Linux driven, as much as 71%. The number fluctuates a little bit. It's not quite 71%. It's like 71.8 or 71.9% or something like that. Linux is a very flexible platform, and it's something that I've always loved about it. You could pretty much throw Linux on everything. And when my career started, I kind of remember a Windows system trying to use Clonezilla and clone it from system A to system B, and then getting a blue screen of death because I, copied a Windows installation to another computer, do the same thing on Linux, and it works just fine. Nowadays, I know how to get away with doing that on Windows, as I'm sure many of you in the audience are Windows system administrators and know exactly how to do that. But one of the things I've noticed is that Linux is very scalable and flexible. Early in my career, I noticed that LVM, Logical Volume Manager, very early on, it was just like magic to me that you could resize a file system while it's running. I mean, that's incredible. Nowadays, that doesn't really matter so much because there's a number of file systems that do that, and it's not quite as exciting as it used to be. But the majority of AI is Linux driven. And many edge deployments rely on Linux, whether that's implementations and IoT devices, smart home devices, smart speakers, all kinds of different things rely on Linux either directly or indirectly. So again, that doesn't mean you have to install Linux on a computer to use AI, obviously, but AI usually has come from Linux in some form or fashion. And many AI-related career roles assume Linux competency. So Linux is one of those things that even if your job that you're trying to get or already have is very, AI-centric, chances are they're going to expect that you at least know a little bit about Linux. So I think that's kind of telling that Linux fits into the picture and has a big prominent place there. But one of my favorite things about this, and this isn't necessarily, it's directly related to Linux, but it's not. Administrators in general can benefit from this, but sometimes just unpacking things and making sense of things is something that AI could really help us with. And when we deal with Linux, sometimes well, actually not sometimes, a lot of times it's hard. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started the YouTube channel, because it's kind of hard to learn. I mean, even when you think you're getting a handle on it, something else comes out. I'm learning QEMU 1 minute, and then, oh, now here comes Kubernetes, and I got to learn that. There's always something new to learn, and keeping up with it is kind of hard. And sometimes it's when you're working on a project, for example, a client asks you to build a cloud environment for them, and maybe you're excited like I would be. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a fun project, but where do I begin? What do I do? How do I connect the systems? Software-defined networking, how should I subnet everything? And then which distribution should I use? How should I tune the kernel? And all these different things. Sometimes AI often can be very helpful in helping us unpack the project in general. It's one thing to have it generate code for us that may or may not compile, but what AI usually does a good job of, at least in my opinion, is just telling it, I have this project, this is my goal, these are the requirements, this is what needs to happen, what are some options here? And even if you don't want to go along with what AI tells you, because obviously every administrator is creative, has his or her own opinion on how things should be developed, but it can start getting the brain going, and it can start to remove a little bit of anxiety too, because sometimes when you have a really big project, you're like, well, I have all these different things that I have to develop. What order should I develop them in? Things like that. And then sometimes AI, even if you don't go exactly according to its plan, it's still going to give you an idea of some of the things that you might expect. And Linux, like I mentioned more than a few times, is somewhat difficult to learn. AI can break down difficult subjects. I mean, if anyone has looked at the manual page for rsync, you know what I'm talking about. It's ginormous. Like, how many options does a single command actually need? I mean, you could keep scrolling the rsync page for like 4 or 5 minutes before you actually get to the end of it. And there's no way that anyone is going to learn everything. I get asked a lot from a lot of people, how do you memorize all these commands? I don't, neither does anyone else. We memorize the commands that we use every day. We memorize the options that we use every day, but it's just not possible to memorize everything. And if you did manage to do that, that means your family hasn't seen or heard from you in a very, very long time. But sometimes it's just helpful to have AI break it down for you. Like, okay, I want to copy files from server A to server B using rsync. This is my network connection speed, the type of cable that I have. What are the options that I should use here? And maybe it'll give you the options that you need. And often looking things up in AI is faster than scrolling through a man page. So even if you don't want to use AI all that much, even if you just use it for that one thing, it's definitely beneficial. But we also need to have reasonable expectations. I've already mentioned a few times now that AI is not perfect. It actually hallucinates. So let's talk about some reasonable expectations. Like I mentioned before, it's a new technology. And from an enterprise perspective, like I said, I mean, if it's not 10 years old, then we don't trust it. Sometimes it can hallucinate, providing code that doesn't compile or making false claims. So that's why we have to fact check it. Obviously, don't rush AI generated code into production, okay? You're just asking for trouble. Sure, it might work well, but there's a reason why we have test environments, specifically isolated test environments on an isolated network that cannot reach production, because we can throw whatever code we want at it, and if we break it, it's fine. It's a test environment. We can, reprovision the environment, no problem. But definitely don't rush AI generated code into production. Just make sure that it does exactly what you think it does before you actually implement it. One time I had it basically look at one of my scripts, my provisioner script for my automation system. I just kind of wanted to see, what it would do. And I think I have, I don't know, I could probably guess, let's say 500 or 600 lines of code in this bash script. And I just feed it into AI. I'm like, can you simplify this for me? And it did. It got it down to 200 lines of code. Most of the features still worked, but not all of them. And I lost the ability to pass command line arguments to my script at that point. So it got the basic gist of what I was doing, but it didn't quite follow what I was trying to do completely. So again, test it first. I like to think of AI as a tool that leads to a solution rather than being a solution itself. As we're going to talk about later, as AI gets better, we could rely on it more, especially agentic AI and things like that, being more I don't want to say self-aware because that would scare people, but basically more self-sufficient is where it's going. But again, if you use AI as a starting point, I find out that today it works really well that way. Whether you want to unpack a command and the options that you should use, you got this really big project you need to work on and you're not really sure where to begin or how to break it down. Things like that, generally speaking, it does a fantastic job. Let's talk a little bit more about how AI benefits system administration. Like I mentioned a few times, there's a lot to keep track of, and it's amazing to me that the types of things that we learn the hard way. I worked with an administrator who had an amazing backup system in AWS. I mean, it just backed up everything it saw, well, almost everything. What he didn't actually notice is that in an LVM configuration where you have multiple disks, it wasn't getting every disk. It got the first one, but it didn't get the other one. So obviously restoring a system from that kind of a backup isn't really possible. And I could go on and on and on and on. There's so many different things that we need to keep track of and troubleshoot. And then we're going to have an example of this later on, but we could use it to analyze our systems and provide recommendations. Now, one of the things that is probably the most stressful about being an administrator is when you have people breathing down your neck because something's down. And when things are down, it costs money. The CTO wants to know when it's going to be back up, but you can't predict how long it's going to take you to figure out the problem, can you? So it's this Kobayashi Maru of a question that nobody could really answer. And Star Trek fans will know exactly what I just meant by that. But it can analyze our systems often faster than we can. It can make connections. And I think sometimes that's what's important, because when you have a system that's down, maybe a network server or a storage server is down, which is causing another server to go down because it relies on storage from that server. Maybe you have a DNS server that's actually not responding because it's DNS records, its cache is on a drive that's now offline. So now a NAS server is causing a DNS server to go down, all kinds of weird things. Obviously, we're competent. We can figure this stuff out, but I think one of the values here is that it can analyze our systems often faster than we can. It doesn't mean that it's going to be right. It doesn't mean that the problem that it finds is going to be the problem that you need to fix. But at the very least, it could give you an idea where you stand when you're dealing with the problem. So we talked about this. It could work on complex tasks. AI could break them down. So if you have a situation where you need to fix something and you have to touch 10 different systems, sometimes it's good just to kind of say, hey, these are my systems. What order do I need to fix these in? Or, how might things be related when seemingly unrelated problems end up being related and then ends up being DNS because, of course, that's what it is. But like I mentioned before, it's often faster to ask AI than it is to check a manual page manually, for lack of a better word. So what I mentioned before about AI done right, I'm going to talk about NetData. And I want to be clear, NetData has sponsored my YouTube channel several times in the past. They did not sponsor this talk. They had no input on this talk. They probably don't even know that this talk is happening. When companies sponsor my channel, I make sure that it's something that I actually like, something that I actually find value in, and something that I actually use. You wouldn't believe the things that come into my inbox. I mean, if I answered yes to everything, I'd be trying to sell you a robot vacuum, a mattress, makeup, underwear. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of different things. But the fact is, if I really like something, then of course I'll let them sponsor me. And NetData is an example of AI done right. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I've done a video about this in case you guys are curious more about it. But one of the things that I like about NetData's implementation of AI is that it doesn't force it on you. Okay. I mean, it gets tiring when, you open up your browser and then the AI button is glowing because it really wants your attention, just really wants you to click on that button. You're just trying to get your work done, not be interrupted. And other things too will interrupt you. But NetData does have a button. It doesn't glow or flash or anything like that. But you wouldn't even know that NetData has AI features unless you went looking for it. And that's how I like it. And when we go back to what I said earlier about AI succeeding or failing, depending on us, a lot of times it depends on the developers. If they're trying to cram it down our throats, we're just going to get tired of it after a while and it's going to crash. We're going to take it for granted because AI, all the things, gee, thanks, but what does this mean to me and how does this benefit my life? And I think that's really important for people to keep in mind. When you use AI within NetData, the features are largely hidden, but they're there when you need them. It's like this little icon that's really tiny. I swear you'd miss it. And next to pretty much any, and I wish I had screenshots, sorry about that in advance, but when you have a metric, for example, a CPU metric or an error message, and this is a really good example. You're going through the logs, which NetData can get the logs from your servers, and you click on the AI button next to a log entry. It'll find correlating events from other servers to give you a bigger picture of what exactly is happening. Is this error message something internal to this server? Or is it being caused by something else that the server's trying to reach that is now down? It's become very, very good, very, very beneficial for me. Even recently, it alerted me that I may or may not have a defective RAM module on my TrueNAS server, which I better get to fixing anyway. It does a great job making sense of logs and metrics. But one of my favorite things about it is that if relevant, it'll give you the command that you need to enter to fix the problem. It'll literally give you the command you need right then and there. Now, obviously, again, trust, but verify. You should throw that command in the test environment because I don't want anybody's file systems to get wiped out just because they overly trust AI. But you look at this command and you get a general idea of the options that you want to do. And of course, you could just open up a terminal and run the man command against something and look at each one of the options that AI wants you to use just to make sure that it does exactly what you want it to do. But I think it's just a really cool thing that it's able to correlate things from different systems and also give you commands to fix it, which was pretty incredible for me. Now let's talk a little bit about how AI helps us with completing tedious tasks. And the fact is, as system administrators, Personally, I think the job is fun, and I still consider myself a system administrator because at my company, I'm basically everything, including the system administrator. But I have a lot of fun with it. I like going on systems and fixing things. I love puzzles and figuring things out. But sometimes things just aren't that fun. I already gave you guys an example that I'm sure many of you know too well, where you have the CTO wanting to know when the systems are going to be back up. That heart pounding rush of anxiety that you feel trying to, obviously figure out the problem. But if your boss asks you, "Oh, I've just bought a brand new server. Could you set it up for me?" Yes. Yes, I absolutely will do that. You get that rush of dopamine. You feel pretty good. It's going to be a fun project. But if your boss asks you to prepare a report of system usage over the past week, that's a little tedious. Okay. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that love numbers and would have no problem with that and think that's a lot of fun. But for a lot of us, get asked things like that. It's like, oh gosh, I'd rather be building a server than having to deal with all the numbers and spreadsheets, or someone asks you to fix an Access database for those few companies that still have one. But with AI, we can kind of offload some of those tasks. And I think one of the best things about that is the creativity aspect, because I do feel that when we're asked to do something tedious or annoying, overall, our creativity kind of goes down. When creativity is used in system administration, we can find clever ways to solve something, clever ways to build something. If you're an Ansible fan like me, you could find a clever automation. You feel really good about that. But the minute you have to work on the more mundane things, that takes you away from the fun. And I think overall, the company systems aren't going to run as well because, again, creativity is dopamine and tedium is totally not. And I use this example too. AI can help us with DevOps by providing Ansible snippets, Chef or Puppet, if that's more your thing, and generating scripts. And sometimes it's not just about using the code that AI gives you. And here I am talking about creativity, and it almost sounds like I'm saying, well, just have AI to be the creative force. No, 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 not necessarily. Sometimes when I ask AI to do something in Ansible, I almost never do it the way AI tells me to. I've been using Ansible since like 2016. I'm very particular about this. And one time, and I did a video about this, I wanted to remove every LibreOffice package from a Fedora system. And AI came back with package removal command for every single possible LibreOffice package, one after another. And I just solved it by setting the package name to LibreOffice star, and I was done. But sometimes it's just about asking AI just to give you an idea. And sometimes you might like the way AI is doing something. Most of the time I don't. I just like to do it my way, or it's not using the right number of spaces for tabs or something like that. But sometimes just seeing how it breaks down the problem is really a good way to get started. At least it gets your brain cylinders fired up. And like I mentioned before, again, many times, because when you have a difficult project, sometimes I see administrators, especially those starting out, that don't succeed because they're worried, they're anxious. What if I do a bad job? What if I can't figure this out? What if I don't know how to connect these systems together? Sometimes just having AI break down things into smaller tasks, that really helps. With my ADHD, personally speaking, and anyone that in the audience that has ADHD, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get this project and it's like you're a deer caught in headlights, like, oh my God, how do I work on this? And then what I've taught myself over the years is if you break it down into smaller tasks, it seems a lot more approachable. This huge project is going to take me a month, but if I break it down into 15 tasks, I think I could do these two things by the end of the week. And then it just seems more approachable because you're checking things off little by little and you're seeing that progress towards your goal rather than just one big project. And sometimes with AI, it just helps with breaking that down just so you can get a better idea of how you could do that. Now, speaking of mundane, I'm sure some people get excited about kernel patching, but it's not really that exciting, believe me. It's really, really not, okay? So backporting kernel patches is an example of a tedious task. And I think some distributions really create their own work in this regard. For example, I used to call Ubuntu's kernel the Franken kernel because they would just use an older version of the kernel, but then they backport fixes for bugs from a newer kernel version, or they're not using an LTS kernel. They want to use a short-term supported kernel, but then support it long-term by just backporting packages. And that's their decision as a project. Obviously, they would probably have their reasons for deciding to do it that way. but it's a huge burden, an absolutely huge burden. And as many as 10,000 new patches have landed in the mainline kernel over a 10-week period. That's crazy. Okay. That's a lot of tedious things being done. And no offense to any of you in the audience if you do enjoy kernel patching. Sorry, no judgment. Stable and long-term support, kernel maintainers usually review around 100 patches per day, every day, including weekends and holidays. So, and this is where we got to be careful because I don't want to see anyone's job eliminated personally. I mean, AI is great, but I think people are greater, right? We have families, we have our dreams and our aspirations. Nobody wants to get that pink slip. That's just sad. But at the same time, when it's, you're dealing with 100 patches per day and you're losing weekends, well, your family is probably not very happy with you in that case. It's probably time to get some assistance. And if AI can help us with some of that work, that's even better. And maybe that'll give you your weekends back, if nothing else. So I guess I'm pro weekend and not pro losing your job. The Open Source Summit, Sasha Levin talked about AutoCell, an AI tool written in Rust that uses large language models to help triage patches. And a lot of the work with patches is just finding out, especially when it comes to bug reports, if that's what the patch is in response to, like how many people reported the same problem. And a lot of times people obviously aren't going to use the same words when they submit a bug report. My screen's not working. Then someone else says, well, my screen times out in every 5 minutes, or someone else says it's flickering, but it's the same problem, right? It's taking a developer time to kind of figure out and link that these three people are talking about the same bug, and people are submitting bug after bug after bug. But this individual wrote a Rust tool that helps triage patches, and it's a really interesting article to check out. It's doing the first round, to be clear. It's doing the first round of triage. It's not actually going beyond that. But that first round of triage is very valuable because that's really helping narrow things down and lowering the number of things that you have to address, which means one person in that role is not as stressed out as they would be otherwise. And he created this tool in just 20 minutes. Okay, talk about an overachiever. Oh my gosh. But I'm proud because I love to see things like this in the community. So, and this is a situation where he had someone who saw a problem. They used AI to solve it, not in a way that eliminated his job. It's just doing the first round of triaging and things like that. So, that's pretty cool. And AI can help us learn. There's a lot to learn, and not everyone has an easy time making sense of things. I already mentioned earlier with my ADHD, learning was really hard for me. And it's funny, people look at my YouTube videos, and they probably never would have thought that. You're not seeing all the other things that are edited out, or all the things or all the years I had to do to learn it, all the F-bombs I say anytime something doesn't work and I have to re-record an entire section again, I just edit that out. So it probably looks like, oh yeah, he knows everything. No one knows everything. But one of the things too is that documentation itself can be overwhelming. And let's not forget that sometimes documentation is lacking because developers aren't always writers, right? They're really good at code. Maybe they're good at writing, maybe they're not, or maybe they're hoping that someone steps up and helps them out with documentation, but nobody volunteers to do it. So obviously documentation itself can be overwhelming, and with everyone having a different learning style, that's also kind of hard, especially when you have a teacher that's teaching a classroom. And this is a big pet peeve of mine, when the teacher expects everyone to follow, right? Not everyone in that room learns the same way. So there's always going to be someone left behind. There's always going to be someone that doesn't understand. There's always going to be someone that raises their hand and isn't noticed, and then their question doesn't get answered. With AI, even those of you in college, you can always ask AI for clarity, or ask AI to point you to some articles that'll help you understand something, that'll help you find that information quicker. So if your teacher didn't get to your question, then maybe AI will point you to an answer as well. We should talk about using AI responsibly. And I think this is something that not a lot of people really understand. I think part of this is that sometimes AI feels like a Christmas present. Ooh, new language model. I get to do new things now. I'm going to just have it do the things. But we got to kind of slow down and think about it a bit. So let's explore that. Unless you host your own AI solution, which I'm sure a number of you in the audience do, all the information you send to an AI engine or agent ends up in the cloud. I want you to think about that for a minute. I'm sure nobody in this audience, but I'm sure somebody out there has pasted API keys into ChatGPT, right? And for those of you that are starting out, the API key is kind of like the master key that gets you into everything. I mean, Red Hat recently had something happen that I won't get into. But also think about your company. If you work for a company, if your company produces a product that no one else does, and then you start putting schematics or blueprints into AI. Sure, I'd like to say that everything is safe and everyone on the other end of that AI agent is doing his or her best to keep that data safe. But what I also know, especially from a security standpoint, is there's no such thing as a non-hackable system. Actually, there is. There is a such thing as a non-hackable system. If you want a system where you cannot hack, that cannot be hacked, the mentality you have to adopt is do not use a computer, do not turn one on, and don't own one. You're unhackable at that point. But if you fail any one of those three things and you're a computer user at all, the only thing that separates a threat actor, their ability to get into your system is just how persistent they are. So, it seems like every week a company is breached or has a problem. And Nintendo recently had a leak. Okay, like it happens to everyone. You'd think Nintendo would have a lot of security, and maybe they do. Maybe it's just the way it is. Again, persistence is how it is. But if you're willingly putting company secrets into AI, that actually scares me. And sometimes you could just, put an API key that's fake. Just use a password generator. There's my API key. What if you have to put one in a field in code? Just don't use a real one. Personally identifiable information, and then immediately I think of HIPAA, for example. For those of you that work in the medical industry, you know what I'm talking about. If anybody in a medical related company, unintentionally or accidentally, or did they just don't know any better, starts putting information about patients in there. Oh, Bob has this blood type and needs this. What do I do? Maybe I'm thinking about medical stuff because I watched The Pit last night. But anyway, that's a different story. But basically, when you're entering information into AI, we do have to be mindful that the things we're entering is legal and isn't going to get the company in trouble, or isn't going to expose secrets or trade secrets to other companies that would then come back at us. So we just got to keep that in mind. And again, it's a point so nice, I have to bring it up thrice. Don't run code AI directly in production environments, okay? I'm going to probably say it about 4 more times before this entire presentation is over. Basically, just use your best judgment. Don't be in such a hurry, right? Just you want to use AI for something, you want to paste something in there. Just stop and think for a minute. Should I, or should I maybe sanitize it a little bit? If you're pasting a log entry into AI, check it first to make sure that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be, or some information about the company. Just use your best judgment. But AI can also be amusing. So we're going to take a little break from the serious stuff, and we're going to kind of start to look at wasting time, because, if life is too serious all the time, it's just boring. So if you want some fun things to try, here's a few examples of how you can waste time with AI. So basically, consider asking AI for something completely ridiculous. And at the end of a workday, I probably spend about 10 minutes doing stuff like this all the time because it's just great. For example, consider asking AI to generate a Hello World script using as many lines of code as possible. It's hilarious. I think I got it up to a bash script up to 64 lines of code just to print Hello World. Okay, obviously you're never going to use anything like that in production, but it does kind of show you some weird bash things that you probably wouldn't have thought of before. So it's just a good idea to waste time, or a good way to waste time. But my favorite, obviously, is, like I mentioned a few times, you can have AI explain things to you, like explain the rsync command. What is systemd? Explain, or what is Wayland and why are people talking about it? These are things we can ask AI to explain, but it's a lot more fun if you ask AI to explain it as if it was a fictional character. For example, the kill command being explained by Wednesday Addams. And this is a quote right here that I actually got from AI last night because I wanted something funny. So as she says here, the kill command, everything stops eventually. The kill command just helps it happen sooner. Thought that was a pretty funny one. Or sudo explained by Spock. This command allows a mere user to act as a supreme administrator, or as humans say, the one person who can really mess things up. And have some fun with this. Another one of my favorites is the LS command explained by Regina George from Mean Girls. It's great. But as funny as that might have been, AI isn't always a good thing. We do have to get the elephant or address the elephant in the room here, right? There's definitely some downsides. But one of the things, I guess this point here isn't really specific to AI. You could probably use this point about more than a few things. If AI is a hammer, then not every task is a nail. And I've seen this all throughout my career. You know, someone learns Python, they have to do everything in Python, even when it might be simpler in Bash. Or someone learns AWS, so they have to go move all the things into AWS, and then they wonder why their storage bill is $20,000 a month all of a sudden because they didn't know that storage is more expensive in the cloud. In this mentality, it's one of the mentalities that I think separates like an entry-level person from a advanced administrator. As you go through your career, you realize there's always a right tool for the job. It might not be Python every time. It may or may not be Rust, depending on the situation you're dealing with. Maybe you want to throw it in a container. I worked with a company that had a rule that everything needed to be containerized, to the point where they were literally changing the URLs that an Nginx was calling in real time because the actual application, I wish I could remember which one it was, did not support running in containers. So they spent months to force one application to run in a container. But getting back to AI, just because it's here doesn't mean we have to use it. It's a tool just like anything else. It makes sense to use it when it makes sense to use it. But every now and then, maybe it doesn't. Just got to use your best judgment on that too. And AI is in everything nowadays to a fault. It's funny because Firefox, I haven't had a chance to check it out yet, but I'm pretty sure they have an AI agent in there now, which is kind of surprising coming from Mozilla, but it is what it is. There's AI browsers now, which I guess being old school, I really don't understand that. But if it's something that you enjoy using, that's totally fine. But I think the biggest problem with this is that this can create AI fatigue. Okay, if developers everywhere are putting AI in things just for the sake of having AI in things, it's going to cause AI to crash, and then it's going to just obviously, I'm not saying it's going to die off, obviously, but if we basically shove it down everyone's throat, they're just going to get tired of it. We got to be intelligent with it. Use it when it makes sense to use it. Include it in our application if it offers true value to the consumer, and true value to the consumer is not keeping up with the company next door. Does it actually benefit your customers? In that case, absolutely implement it. I already gave the example of NetData. They do a fantastic job, and it's probably my favorite example of AI done right in a product nowadays. But sometimes it's in everything to a fault. We just got to keep mindful of that. And obviously, if you're a system administrator, not a developer, it's like, yeah, I agree, but what can I do about it? The developers never listen to me anyway. But anyway. But another thing too is that if you're not careful, you can overly rely on it. And I use the example many times of bringing up information and looking up information, and that it's faster to find information than looking through a man page. But what if you don't have access to your AI agent and your customer wants something fixed? And if you're especially entry level coming up nowadays, I would think that you're going to be using AI a lot more. If you overly rely on it, that could be a problem. And one of the ways that you can work around this is that if AI gives you some kind of result that's good, save it in a text file, right? Like it says, these are my favorite rsync options. I'm going to have an rsync file, and I'm going to have these written down here. So anytime I need it, I can get back to it. This is the command that I've used to copy information from servers last week, so I'm going to save that. And then at some point, you kind of build your own knowledge base. And as an aside, if you haven't learned version control yet, and you haven't learned Git, creating notes is the best way to do it. You don't have to be a software engineer to use Git. Git is great for many things, and I cover this in my videos, but even if you have a repository it's just notes, things you've learned, this is what I learned today, commit that into a repository, and then you learn version control naturally at the same time that you're taking notes. And then when you don't have your AI agent available because, DNS probably, then you don't have to worry about it because, you have your notes, and chances are you probably have something in there. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that no one really remembers everything. We're human, right? We remember the things we use a lot. When it comes to LVM, Logical Volume Manager, I don't have those commands memorized. believe it or not, because I'm not resizing a volume or growing a file system every day. I'm lucky to do that twice a year. Usually, I notice if a system space is starting to run out, I add a new volume and I extend it. I just look at my notes. There's the command. But again, that's just a good way to keep notes. But then also, it helps build a database or a knowledge base that you can use to where AI is benefiting you, but you're not crippled if you don't have access to it. Now, and this is really the hardest thing to talk about of any point in this entire presentation, that some job roles are being replaced by AI. Okay. And people will ask, what do I do about that? How do I protect myself from being phased out by AI? And there really isn't an easy answer to that, because obviously somebody might say, well, have a plan B career. Oh, gee, thanks. I'll just set up my plan B career tomorrow. No problem. That's fine. It doesn't, I mean, that's just not realistic, right? A lot of people, and it doesn't even have to be a technical role, right? It could be any role. And you've built your skills in this role for years. And it's not like you could just create a new job role for yourself the next day. You should always keep your skills sharp and remember that AI needs to be run by a human. Okay. Obviously, that's going to be important, but you got to keep your skills sharp. And one example I give people is to talk to a career counselor. Okay. Because everyone in this room has different skills, right? So if you have a career counselor or someone that could say, okay, let me see your resume, and it's not like you're looking for a job or anything, but you're just asking for guidance, maybe some of the skills that you have map to another career that won't take a long time to get. Maybe there's so much overlap between your current job role and another one that you really don't have to spend that much time to learn it. And obviously, I hope that this doesn't happen to anybody. But I do feel that you do have to kind of keep your eye on this a little bit, because again, there's really no easy answer to this. It's just something to keep in mind. It's happening to people. You know, Amazon, for example, it happened recently. There's another company in the news in the past week. I just recently moved, so I don't remember who it was. But just keep your skills sharp. Talk to a career counselor. Talk to your peers. Just have that dialogue going. And one thing that I did that I think works really well before I went on my own, before I had this business, when I was just, not just, but when I was working for a company, I had a feeling that something wasn't right. Okay. I was like, something's off. The bosses aren't acting right. And it wasn't toward me. They were like this to everyone. So I literally went to actually a recruiter, and I said, I'm not looking for a job. I'm gainfully employed. I get paid enough. I have great health insurance. I'm not trying to leave my company right now. I actually like what I do. But I wanted to have a conversation with you and give you my resume and talk to you about my skill set, because, I just want to have that dialogue, but also I think there's just something's not quite right here. 3 weeks later, they announced that the company's shutting down. And by then I already had an interview. I was already on my second interview by that third week, and I had a new job the following Monday after they closed down. Okay, so this is kind of one of the things that you could do is kind of have that dialogue, talk to recruiters, talk to a career counselor. And sometimes the best time to do that is when you're not looking for a job, because when you're looking for a job, you're frantic. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I have bills. But if you have these conversations with a recruiter, you get your name out there and you get that dialogue going, everything's a lot easier if something bad happens later down the road. But again, I hope that doesn't happen to any of you, but this is the hardest thing to talk about, but it is part of our world today. So we do got to kind of try to prepare ourselves for the world that we live in. Now, let's talk about the future of AI. And this conversation is hard for a different reason, right? Because when in the IT industry, I don't feel personally that analysts predict well. I remember in 2010, every IT analyst in the world was saying the laptop is dead. Netbooks are here. Everyone's going to have a netbook. No one's going to buy a desktop. No one's going to buy a laptop. It's all netbooks, all the things. And how many people here have one? Just curious. One, two. Yeah, IT analysts, right? No judgment to IT analysts, because I'm sure a lot of them do a good job, but it's just that AI, it's hard to predict. And, IT in general is just hard to predict because, we would think that MySpace would still be a thing because IT analysts said that MySpace would be here and that Facebook would never catch on. And then Facebook just mopped the floor with MySpace and it's completely gone. So these predictions, obviously, I'm not going to give you a huge percentage of how correct they're going to be, but I think there's some obvious conclusions we could draw from this. It's saying that AI will become more agentic, which means it requires less human interaction. I guess the easiest way to explain that is, okay, I want this report run, every week, and I guess it kind of already does that. But basically, it's AI doing the thing without you having to kick it off, and it's drawing conclusions from images and things, and having a bigger brain, for lack of a better word. But I think that's probably obvious because AI capabilities are increasing, and we see that pretty much every time we open up ChatGPT or Claude AI and see the feature list that they've added new features. But also expect more scrutiny. And this is going to be the other thing that can make or break IT or AI, because privacy concerns are real. And the thing is, you could have text generated. I want to write a paragraph about this flower that I see out of my window. I don't know why I use that example. And then that's really great, and you get something, but then you find out it's like too similar to something else, or someone's using it to write a song, and you tell AI it needs to be original. Don't use something from Taylor Swift, and all of a sudden Taylor Swift is mad at you. But obviously that's funny. But privacy concerns are real, and going back to the legal thing, it's only a matter of time, if it hasn't already happened, that we see a medical company that's in trouble with the law because patient records are floating around the internet because someone, entered them into AI. Privacy concerns are real. And in this case, we could have governments involved in this. We have the GDPR overseas. That is obviously a concern. And it's too easy to trip copyright when you don't even know that you are. So just expect more scrutiny and expect more news stories to kind of highlight this, especially recently. And I don't know why this is creepy to me. I don't know how many people have seen this story. I can't remember the actress's name. She's not real. She doesn't exist. But someone created this AI actress and then wants to sell her, likeness or whatever to star in roles and things like that. And of course, Hollywood is getting upset. Like, you're trying to replace real actors. And of course, that's already triggering scrutiny. Just expect more of that, but that's just the world we live in. So nothing we could do much about it. But one of the biggest things is the cybersecurity war. The thing is, threat actors are always looking for clever ways to break into our systems, and it's not just about 0 days or the things that we don't know yet, that haven't been patched yet, but as things go on further, the cybersecurity war is going to be fought with AI on both sides. And a lot of times it already is. We're talking about triaging bugs. Security reports are being triaged this way. CVEs, for example, vulnerabilities, common vulnerabilities and exposures. The Linux kernel is using this. I mean, there's all kinds of different things. But when it comes to security, if a threat actor is wanting to break into a system, they're not going to say, I could use AI and break into that system faster, but I have an honor code I need to stick to, and I'm just not going to go there. No, okay? If there's a way in, they're going to use it. And when it comes to the cybersecurity people and ethical hackers that are fighting this and trying to find these things, they're going to be spread a lot thinner as the threat actors are ramping up their attacks with AI. Then obviously the only thing that can really keep up with them is, of course, AI, looking for similarities and things to map out. So we already kind of see this, but I do feel like it's going to be going on and getting bigger, where we have, it sounds cool to call it a cybersecurity war, but it's really no different than the cybersecurity war that was fought before AI. When there's a new tool, it'll be used on both sides. But I don't think that AI is going to enslave us. Keep in mind, we could pull the power cord. Okay, it's funny to me, like, AI is going to take over mankind. I guess we'd be saved if the power grid went down then. But sometimes people over sensationalize everything, and they think that it's going to be the end of things. It's not that bad. It's not bad at all. If I had to predict what I think AI, the ultimate form of AI is, which is not for the tech people, not for the system administrators, the IT professionals, but if we think about the general user, someone who checks Facebook and they don't even like computers, right? They just post on Facebook or they just share pictures with their friends. I think AI, generally speaking, is the beginning of the end of the keyboard and mouse. They'll be dictating to the screen. It'll be transcribing what they're saying. They'll be, upload a picture of my grandchild to Sue down the street, and then AI goes through Facebook and does that. Those types of things. Obviously, for tech people, we're not. I mean, come on, we're not going to be totally all about that. And I don't think the keyboard and mouse are going to die for everyone. But I think when it comes to the general user, the person that doesn't care about computers, that's kind of what it is. And of course, I'm thinking, and again, another Star Trek reference, in Star Trek 4, where Scotty goes back in time and he sees this DOS computer with this mouse, and he's trying to talk to the computer, and it doesn't respond. He picks up the mouse and starts talking to it, that kind of thing. And maybe in his future, AI did get to that point, and we all know it did if you saw Star Trek. Oh, computer, turn up the temperature, things like that. So again, those are just some of the predictions, but keep in mind, a lot of IT cannot be predicted because for all we know, somebody could be programming in their basement right now something that'll similarly take off and be a big buzz, and we don't even know it exists yet, but he or she is writing that code. But looking forward to Linux and AI. I already talked about having AI triage bug reports, but that helps developers focus more time on code and creativity. If developers are just tired, they're not creative, right? They don't have that energy. Oh my God, I got to fix another or triage another bug report. But the more that we free people up to do their job and have fun doing it, take away the mundane tasks and say, let's be creative. How can we creatively solve this problem? If AI takes some of the mundane things out of his or her, task list, then that person could be all that much more creative. And that creativity goes back into the company, helps them, compete more. They come up with better ideas and better products. Expect build systems to become more intelligent, allowing developers to do more in less time. That's probably obvious, but when it comes to building a distribution, which I've done, it takes a long time. There's just a lot to do. It's not just generating the ISO file and putting it on a website. There's a lot more to it than that. We can see things that are, that complicated be a lot easier. And I think that's also going to result in a lot more distributions. As if we needed more, there's like 300 on DistroWatch. It just shows the top 100. Believe me, there's more further down they're not showing you. But at the same time, again, creativity. People can focus on the new features and giving their users some kind of a service, but they could do more in less time. And I think that's a good thing. As long as we're not overusing it and over-relying on it, that's fine. AI will help us find security flaws faster, but again, threat actors will use AI for the same reason. So it's kind of a bit of a tug-of-war match between the good guys and the bad guys in that respect. And if AI is implemented within Linux with care, meaning someone is creating if someone built a distribution with AI and it was a good one, I mean like a really good one, that's great. But if we start getting garbage distributions that have not that much to it and barely work and they just flood the market, then Linux and AI both will suffer for that. And that goes back to the success of AI depends on us, how we implement it. How thoughtful are we, the developers, implementing it with care? We ultimately shape the future. And that's basically something to keep in mind. I mean, it's really up to us. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. And there's our video. In this video, I went over my thoughts about AI in 2025 and how it pertains to Linux. I really hope you guys found value in this presentation. If so, then be sure to click that like button to let YouTube know. Also, I want to take a moment and thank each and every one of you that attended this event in person. It was so amazing seeing all of you. But also, I wanted to thank All Things Open for hosting me again. It's a fantastic conference, so I highly recommend that you attend All Things Open if you have a chance to. I'll be there, but not just me. There's all kinds of really cool people at this event, all kinds of things happening, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.